Do you want me to start, Bella?
Yeah, I'll just say a
Do you
few
want
things.
to wait till 5 past? What do you think?
I think we could start in about 2 minutes. We normally get about half capacity, so I don't expect many more people to come on now. But just a few things. As I just said, it is going to be recorded, so I hope everyone's okay with that. And it will be made available on our website under previous events in a week or two. Please do keep yourselves muted as we go through the presentation, but feel free to keep your cameras on. It's always nice to see friendly faces. Please leave your questions until the end. Kate will do a lovely introduction, and then Alex, our speaker, will do around about a 40-minute presentation. And then afterwards, we should have about 5 to 10 minutes of questions. So put them in the chat as we go if you like, and then we'll go through them at the end, or at the end, if you'd rather ask them yourself, you can unmute yourself and ask it. We also have one more webinar this month, which is on rock pools. I'll put the link in the chat there if you're interested. So thank you all for joining, and over to you, Kate.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Lovely to see some different names in the participant list and to see some faces and names that I know. Today is a DISI talk. DISI stands for Devon Invasive Species Initiative. It was set up in 2016. I can't believe we're 7 years old now, and I currently chair DISI. My day job is the Biosecurity and Invasives Manager at Southwest Water, and I have cunningly managed to combine my two passions, invasive species and mammals, for this talk. I'm active with the Mammal Society and with the Devon and the Cornwall mammal groups, and very excited about today's talk. Before I introduce Alex, I'm just going to very quickly outline, in case we have some new attendees, what invasive species are. So, non-native species have been moved from their place of origin and brought into Britain by humans, and it's critical, it's always by humans. There are around 2,000 non-native species in Britain, and most of them don't cause a problem. However, around 10% become invasive non-natives, and I'm just going to call them invasives from now on. And that means they can have a negative impact on the environment, the economy, or health. They can be plants or animals, terrestrial, freshwater, or marine, or a pathogen like Ash dieback disease. But it's critical you remember they're moved by humans, and that can be intentionally because it's a lovely plant species we'd want in our garden, or accidentally, and that can be on fishing kits or stowaways in cars like Asian hornets. So it's accidental or intentional movement by humans. Invasive non-native species are fascinating species. They're not bad, they're just in the wrong place, and that's because humans have brought them here out of their natural place of origin. And they do really well in Britain because there are no natural predators or competitors. They can be highly mobile, highly reproductive. They can be generalists with a wide range of food sources. There's no disease to limit them. They can adapt to a wide variety of habitats, and they can adapt to climate change and flooding and drought issues easily. So they do outcompete some of our wonderful native species, which is part of the reason they're a problem. So today the focus is rabbits, and that, as you can see from Alex's first slide, is led because it's the Chinese New Year of the rabbit, so it seemed very topical. And I'm delighted our guest speaker is Dr. Alex Barlow. He spoke for Devon Mammal Group in 2019 on hares. I'm only sorry it's taken this long to get him back to talk about rabbits this time. Rabbits are a conundrum. They're a much loved, easily recognised species that people love, but they are also one of Britain's, the world's biggest invasive mammals, causing crop and tree damage. So a very mixed message for the rabbit. And according to the IUCN, they are actually listed internationally as near threatened, and Alex will be explaining some of the things that have walloped the rabbit population. And then there's Dr. Alex Barlow, who is a wonderful, quirky character. He's worked with the Wildlife Veterinary Investigation Service for a long, long time and was based at Starcross. Currently lives in Dorset, I want to say. Alex, do correct me if I'm wrong. But when I say quirky, he is a founder member of the pig species expert group and the wildlife species expert group, and is a specialist in zoonoses, the disease that transmit between humans and animals and vice versa. He's an excellent speaker, and I'm delighted to hand over to Alex. Bella, tell me he's out there. Where is he?
Alex, are you still there? You're just muted, so I'm gonna. Oh no, you're not. Are you there, Alex? You're sharing your screen, so I should hope so.
I can't hear you yet, Alex. You are on mute, though. Oh dear, Bella, it's all gone wrong.
Oh,
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good.
Wonderful, yay.
Right. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can now. Yep.
Yeah. Yes, I'm slightly novice on this IT thing, and I thank Bella for her patience in trying to get the thing to work. I can't get the video to work for some reason, and as I was saying, I'd like to thank Kate for the invitation and pointing out it's a Chinese year of the rabbit, and in fact my daughter is in Hong Kong, so I got her to check that the Chinese character at the bottom actually says rabbit rather than anything disrespectful. Yeah, and also I'd like to thank Kate for the title, Good, Bad and the Ugly, which actually probably sums up what the rabbit does in this country very well. And I will be showing pictures of necropsies and pathology, so there's a sort of warning at the beginning. Right, so in this country we have 3 lagomorphs, and as Kate said, I gave a talk on diseases of European brown hare, which is also a non-native species, and the only normal species we have or had in this country was the mountain hare, which is now present only in Scotland. It was reintroduced to Wales and also Derbyshire, and in fact, sorry, there is a small population left in Derbyshire, but they are fairly threatened. And presumably before sort of pre-Celtic times, there were, mountain hare was the only hare that we had in this country. And one of the problems we see is that I get quite a lot of rabbits that are sent in as hares, especially if they suspect the rabbits or the hares have myxomatosis. And so I've got a chart here which you can read at your leisure, but I think the things to concentrate on are the ears. The ears are actually much longer in a hare and have black tips, although this hare here, the tips are not actually as black as this one here, which is a hare eye post-mortem. And here you've got a rabbit, and you can say, well, the top of that looks slightly dark, but I always think the characteristic thing is that the hare has these very amber eyes, and the rabbit has a sort of brown eye. The actual coat of the hare, when you've got 2 together, it looks a lot redder. The only trouble is if you've got a small hare just by itself without anything to compare it to, you might you'd probably think that's a hare, but a large rabbit, and especially some of them have quite long ears, well, they can be confused for hares. And I have had rabbits sent in as hares from sort of wildlife rescue places. The other thing is that the muzzle of the hare, it tends to be more pointed, and when they're actually running away from you, the rabbit runs its scut or tail up, and you can see this sort of a white flash, whereas when hares are running away from you, they hold the hair down and it has a black dorsal surface. So that's, so if you've got 2 together, it's jolly easy, but if you've just got one singly, you just got to go through and make sure that you've got the right species. Right, actually, this, I think I went through that. Right, so the European names for rabbits. In this country, some people call it, or used to, especially in country areas, used to call them conies, and this comes from the Latin species of rabbit, which is cuniculus. I think generally people call them rabbits, although that used to be the young rabbit, but now I think in towns and even the countryside, people call them rabbits. In the past, the old English word for rabbit or adult rabbit was riot, and this term has come into the language because when hunting was legal, and if people were hunting foxes or hares and the hounds start chasing after a rabbit, which is called a riot, they'd say, the huntsman would shout out "war riot," which is beware of the rabbit. And so the term riot has come into our language as obviously rioting of humans. The young are called kits or kittens or bunnies, and the males, adult male is called a buck, and the female a doe. And there's quite a lot of sort of myths and or new myths regarding rabbits and hares, and I've tried to put something together. It's probably spreading a further new myth. So Ostara is a pagan or near-pagan festival of Istra or Eostra, which is said to be a Jutis goddess. And here is a woodcut of her, and I've put an arrow showing it could be a rabbit. In fact, it's running with its tail up, so it's more likely to be a rabbit than a hare. But hares were associated with this Jutis goddess, and eggs, rabbits and hares were symbolized rebirth and fertility, and this occurs in the spring equinox around about Easter. And roughly around about the same time, hares have forms. They don't have a burrow, so they live on top of the surface, and they have a little sort of just impression in the ground, or maybe just sort of crushed grass, and it can look very like a lapwing's nest. So you've got a sort of myth arose that these eggs were laid by hares in this form. So ecology, going on to the history and geography. So the rabbit originally was native to Spain and Portugal and southern France, and has gradually spread up through Europe. There were limited introductions into this country for food and fur during Roman times, but I think it was very limited, because it is until fairly recently it was always said that rabbits weren't actually introduced until the Normans came. But I think in some villas in Sussex or Kent, they found a few bones of rabbits to say that they were present during Roman times, but there is no evidence that they survived in this post Roman period. And I should mention in the name section, there was there's very references saying that there was no Celtic or Saxon name for hare. I keep saying hare, sorry, that's my favourite mammal, for rabbits. And you might suggest, well, that because they didn't really exist in the countryside at that time. The Irish name is conine, which obviously again comes from the same root as coney, cuniculus. So the Normans brought them in, and they really sort of, I suppose, farmed them. They kept them in warrens, and which had walls around them to protect their rabbits from predators, and presumably they gradually escaped into the rest of GB. But most of the land then was wild and wasn't sort of put over to agriculture. It's when in the sort of mid 18th century agriculture became more established, and the way that the farms were farmed produced an ideal habitat for rabbits. And at the same time, with the large estates culling anything that would prey on rabbits, not because they obviously want to protect rabbits, but they were protecting other game species. Their numbers really started to increase during the 18th century. So this is right. So this is taken from the Britain's Mammals Guide. The last one was 2018, so it's most up to date. Population about 36 million, but as you can see, they're vulnerable in Scotland and threatened in Wales, and future trend appears to be down. And with trying to get a population of any wild species, it's jolly difficult, because you've got to have people sort of wandering around doing sort of head counts or other imagery to try and get a rough population. But at the moment, because of disease, where even in small localities the population can rapidly go up and down, it's very difficult to have any certainty of what the population is in a small local area, or even for the country. It makes it even more sort of a random guess. Then coming on to food and nutrition, because obviously rabbits are eating vegetation, which if we ate grass, we wouldn't really do very well, because we have no way of actually breaking down the grass into sort of useful nutrients that we can absorb through our stomach. So hopefully you can see the pointer here. So ruminants have got around this, sort of cattle and sheep and deer, and so they use these fermentation chambers here, the rumen, reticulum and abomasum, to help break down the cellulose using sort of flora and fauna in the rumen, sort of bacteria and protozoa, and so the unattainable nutrients that are present in grass can be produced, could be altered into something that can be absorbed in the true stomach, which is the abomasum. And so we have an equivalent of an abomasum, that's our true stomach. But the abomasum itself, if it has grass straight into it, it cannot really do very much with it, and then it goes into the small intestine for digestion. But unfortunately, Legumbores seem to have got all this wrong. So they've got the grass comes down and goes into the true stomach, which it cannot really do very much with, and then it goes through the intestine, then comes into the cecum here, and that's the equivalent of the ruminant's rumen. So it's carrying out its fermentation after the nutrients can be absorbed, and so it has to get around this by refection or autocoprophagy. They have what's called night feces, which is sort of fairly wet, moist feces, and these have the products of fermentation in the cecum, and so they eat those and recirculate them. And so then when these night feces get into the true stomach, then they can actually absorb the nutrients from it, and that's really why the horse doesn't have auto refection, and it hasn't got a rumen. So that's why horse manure is so valued, because there's a lot of goodies in there that you can feed to your plants, and I put it out on my vegetable patch earlier this year. So what do rabbits like to eat? Well, arable and horticulture, 43%, and that's really why when the farming changed, the rabbit population kicked off, together with gamekeepers kindly getting rid of all their predators. And then the next one is unimproved grassland, 17%. Dwarf shrub, improved grassland, especially when it's heavily grazed. You've got a lot of sheep and cattle grazing it. There's not going to be much grub there for rabbits. So they will eat a range of wild and cultivated plant species. Bark in the winter, and as we've just heard, they will strip trees. So the Forestry Commission are probably not very keen on too many rabbits around their forestry. But they prefer a short sward, and grazing by rabbits will result in influencing what vegetation is present. Because obviously they're grazing, if they've got enough grass, they'll keep it at a certain level, but it will influence what plants are growing. So as with the beaver, which actually was a native species in this country, and that's called a keystone species, the rabbit, the European rabbit, actually is a keystone ecosystem engineer. So if you've got a very high rabbit population, you get a short grass sward. And this is good for choughs and stone curlews, sand lizards, and the large blue butterfly, which we're trying to reduce in Somerset. And in fact, choughs are now present in Cornwall because they're having to manage the sward, because after myxomatosis, when the rabbit population crashed, the sward wouldn't really have been suitable for choughs to feed. They need to be on short sward so they can probe the soil and get out the grubs that they eat. So you can see that this is a benefit of rabbit, providing the population is at a certain level, they will benefit, such as choughs and the large blue butterfly, which has this really sort of weird, complicated life cycle where it needs short sward, wild thyme, and one particular species, a red ant, it's a brood parasite on these ants, and they look after it. So you can imagine again, crashing rabbit population, the grass is going to get longer. It's going to be a problem for the large blue butterfly. And also in the Iberian Peninsula now, because of disease, there's a real shortage of rabbits, and these are prey species for some of the rarer mammals that they have in the Iberian Peninsula, where there's a lot of work going to reintroduce Iberian lynx, and also birds. The Egyptian vulture and the Spanish imperial eagle prey on the rabbit, so their numbers are threatened, and if their prey species is disappearing, it's going to be really hard to sort of build the numbers up. In fact, I think the Spanish are putting a lot of money into trying to build up the rabbit population, which seems slightly counterintuitive to some people. But in this country, they're prey for stoats, foxes, wildcats, and that's the wildcats in Scotland, because there was, and you see the levels of rabbits in Scotland now is much lower than it used to be, and that was one of the problems with culling out the wildcats. They went to the fastnet of north of Scotland. There wasn't much prey there, so they had to wander around, and that's when they started mixing with the domestic cats and have become hybridized. But if you've got a really good rabbit population, they will stay in their local areas and less likely to encounter domestic cats. And then red kites and buzzards, which we know are sort of coming back. Well, certainly in the West Country, we now see red kites. So if you've got a decreased rabbit population, it is obviously good for some species. You get increased vegetation height, and initially you may get a much greater variety of plant species, but then gradually be choked off by scrub formation. So it's good for field voles. You know, they like nice long grass. They can have their runs, keeping out of the way of owls, etc., and probably my cat. It's good for hares because with short sward, hares can be easily seen by predators. Long sward, if they're leverets, which below ground, the leverets aren't below ground, they're left in small little forms, and so the foxes can hunt them up and find them much more easily in a short sward. If they've got a long grass, they can be more hidden. And other things such as snails and woodlice and spiders. So really, you should aim for sort of a happy medium between the two. And at the moment, the population is just going up and down. It must all these species must be completely confused. And this is a dune system at Aleutius in Wales, and this dunes habitat is maintained by grazing by rabbits. I think if the rabbits weren't there, this would degenerate into scrub. So you can see in certain areas they are a useful species to maintain these ecological and vegetative niches. So I'm just going for predators. This is work done by the Game Conservancy. So the fox, its favourite prey, as you can see down here at the right-hand side, is rabbit. So if you can imagine, if there's a decrease in the rabbit population, sort of it also puts more pressure on the hare, although they can hide more easily, and so it'll go round, and then the gamekeeper will have to shoot more foxes. So that part comes out. So you can see they having a reasonable rabbit population provides a good meal for these various predators. And obviously the other predator is man, either directly sort of shooting and snaring, unfortunately, but also indirectly by habitat loss and road traffic accidents. So some data about rabbits. Lifespan about 3 years. Most die when they're very young. First year, probably a lot of predation. They're quite fast. When they're chased, they'll zigzag because they can see almost all the way around, just a blind spot behind them, so they can see if a fox is chasing them. They can see where the fox is, and they can dart around to sort of keep an eye on them. And they can jump quite a long way as well. Their home is underground burrows or warrens, the word used by the Normans. Small social groups of male, a larger group of females, the does. They can be active during daylight, but with human disturbance, they're more sort of evenings and early mornings. Reproduction, breeds January, August. Gestation, so 30 days between kindling or parturition. So that's a gestation period. So immediately they have their young, they'd be fertile again. Litter size will vary depending on the food supply. So if you've got farmers providing a lot of grub, you'll have large litters. If the population is small, but with increasing population density, there is sort of fetal reabsorption, so you'll have smaller litters. And the kittens, the bunnies, are altricious, which means that they need to be looked after. They're not like leverets that have got a sort of coat from day one. They're looked after, and they'll stay within the burrow for about 18 days, and then weaned fairly quickly. It's about the same age as we wean a piglet, although they would stay on the mother a lot longer if they could. So you can imagine that given the right conditions, the population can increase incredibly. And the does, the ones born earlier in the year, will breed the same year, and the same with the bucks. The males tend to disperse, and the females will remain with their sort of natal group. So maybe some of that's good and some of that's bad. And now we're going on to the ugly bit. Myxomavirus, which is a pox virus. and it causes mild disease in the Silverlagus species, which are present in North and South America. And a guy working in a lab in Uruguay a long time ago, 1896, where they had both Silverlagus species and European rabbits, noticed although the Silverlagus species weren't ill, they seemed to transmit something to the European rabbits, which caused a fatal disease, these large sort of lumps, myxoma. So that's the wrong one there. So they identified this virus that was virtually non-pathogenic to the Silverlagus species, but caused a fatal disease in European rabbits. Transmission mainly by rabbit fleas, that's the Psilopsilus, possibly mosquitoes, or direct contact between animals, or by fomites, which is just sort of contaminated sort of boots or hands or whatever. Presumably that was happening in the lab. And then because rabbits, the population in Great Britain and also Europe and Australia was so large, the estimated that at 1952 prices, rabbit predation eating crops was costing 50 million quid. So I mean that's a vast amount. So they decide to start biowarfare against the rabbit, and they introduced the myxoma virus as a biological control, which was very, very effective. And in the 1950s, a couple of years, it had killed 99% of rabbits. So you can imagine a sort of fairly tightly grazed landscape going to really long, lush pastures within a very short time, because all these rabbits had gone. And initially there would have been lots of grub for all these predators, and then suddenly there'd be nothing. So you can imagine that they'd splurge out, and then the foxes, buzzards, they'd really be scraping around for something to eat. And this is actually the virus here. This is Dave Everest, who's the does the electron microscopy at Weybridge for APHA. So the sort of clinical signs. So you've got the swellings around the eyes, on the muzzle, sort of sometimes weird sort of lumps on the body, around the genital area and around the eyes, sometimes the base of the ears. These just sort of little squashy pinkish lumps. And the problem with this virus, it'll cause immunosuppression. So the immune system of these rabbits is not going to be working well, and then makes them very prone to bacterial infection. And they die with bacterial septicemia, which is sort of bacteria in the blood, and maybe a bacterial pneumonia. They're saying that the virus tends to become becoming less pathogenic, and the rabbits more resistant. But you can imagine if you sort of wiped out that 1% of rabbits left, they must have had something in their genetics that made them slightly more immune to this virus. So gradually, with selective pressure, the rabbits should be becoming more resistant. But as we know, sort of with COVID, viruses are tricky little things, and they keep sort of changing and adding bits on and becoming more resistant, and to try and get their own way over whatever their host is. And in the past, before the other viral disease, which I'll talk about just in a minute, there was a sort of cyclical pattern. Peak incidence in late summer, autumn, where you've got all these susceptible young rabbits, and seasonal movement of fleas. And you can imagine the disease cycle. A number of rabbits are killed, the population decreases, therefore probably less spread between different rabbit groups, and so it goes up and down, and it all depends the level of population density. So they reckon it's was 2 to 8 years, but all this has changed due to rabbit hemorrhage disease virus 1, which is the first incarnation of hemorrhagic disease. Oh, sorry, I should have mentioned this is my contract. I have to mention hares. This is the hare with myxomatosis, and there was suspect that there were presumably in the 50s there would have been, because there were a lot more hares and a lot more rabbits, there would have been hares with myxomatosis, but no, they didn't have the tools that we have now to actually confirm that it's the same virus as the rabbits have. And this is the only case that's been confirmed. And this was in fact, I don't live in Dorset, I live on the Mendip in Somerset, and this was brought in from just a farm a few miles from where I live. So it's spillover, and this actually the lesions, the myxoma lesions, look like they're healing, but in fact this hare died of bacterial septicemia, as rabbits would. So although it is actually recovering, its immunosuppression made it vulnerable to bacterial infection. So there will be sporadic cases reported from around the world, but it is rare. So rabbit hemorrhage disease 1, this is a Kalichi virus, it's an RNA virus, and now it's called classic rabbit hemorrhagic disease. And this was initially diagnosed in China in 1984, and within under 10 years it spread across the world, and we got it in pet rabbits in 92. And obviously this is anthropogenic spread. The rabbits from China aren't going to leg it over here. I think we import quite a lot of Chinese rabbit meat, so it possibly came in that way, but it is a very resistant virus and seems to manage to spread very effectively. And then it was diagnosed in wild rabbits in 1994, but presumably it would have been there before that. That's the thing, is that confirming disease in wildlife is difficult, because it really needs somebody to take an interest and get a sample into a lab that will do the post-mortem and the lab work to confirm what's present. And also, if you're going for a walk and you see a dead rabbit, you're not going to think, oh, I better take this home with me and get somebody to look at it. And he suggested that on some retrospective studies, there were was present in this country, or is present in Europe for 50 years, but maybe it's an avirulent strain, and whether this avirulent virus took antigenic shift or drift and it became pathogenic. The vectors, anything that will prey on rabbit carcasses, foxes, gulls, and then insects, can spread between rabbits in close proximity. So it can be direct or indirect. As I said, the virus is very resistant, and so the feces of anything that's scavenged or predated or killed a rabbit will be infected, that had this disease will be infected with the virus. So you can imagine the feces on the pasture will gradually be washed away, but the virus will still be there. So another rabbit grazing the same pasture will be infected. So it's an oral, so it's fecal oral route really, but indirectly via the pasture. Young rabbits, they say up to about a month old, appear to have a degree of resistance to infection. And usually rapid death, grossly little to see. You might see a little blood around the mouth, around the muzzle, but not always. So usually a rabbit in good condition has died, whereas with MIXI, they're always in poor condition. So the pathology, so to be honest, you see generally see very little. The liver may get a little bit of mottling. This is the liver here. And the main thing, although it's called hemorrhagic disease, it's liver damage that kills them. And so you diagnose the condition by liver histopathology. And here's two sections of liver. This one on the right, which says normal liver, you can see all these pinky liver cells, hepatocytes, and they look really cheerful and plump. But here's the case with rabbit hemorrhagic disease, which is a acute fatal necrotizing hepatitis. All these liver cells look very unhappy and dead and dying. And so it goes from that to that. So you can imagine there's not much activity going on in that liver. And so you can do electron microscopy and PCR, which is a way of detecting antigen even at very low levels. So short sporadic outbreaks, because that's the other thing is with hemorrhagic disease, rabbits tend to die so quickly they can die in the burrow, so you don't see a lot of dead rabbits lying around as you would with myxomatosis. So unfortunately to rabbit hemorrhagic disease 1, there was a sequel. This is hemorrhagic disease 2, which was found in 2010, and it seems to have almost, well, it has replaced rabbit hemorrhagic disease 1. I haven't seen a case of that for a number of years now. No age resistant. And the thing about this, it also affects hares. And I had the first 2 cases in England were a couple of hares in Dorset, which were found just lying very close together, very good condition. It looked like they'd just fallen asleep and died. And at post-mortem, there's very little to see. So we had to do the histopathology and all the sort of PCRs, etc., to confirm that the virus was present. PM findings similar to hemorrhagic disease 1. They say this is a spleen here, quite enlarged, but to be honest, I don't think I've never seen much different. And in fact, I was just reporting a case I had this morning. We got the electron microscopy, which confirmed that it had Kalichi virus, and I had 3 rabbits which had died very quickly, and at post-mortem you couldn't really see anything wrong with them. So we did the PCR. So and the thing is, if you get a chronic infection or a subacute infection, and they're more likely to survive. If a rabbit survives, you're not going to get in for post-mortem, so you're not going to know really what it had. And they say it could cause a more protracted disease with weight loss and jaundice. But again, I've never seen any of these cases. But on the other hand, the number of rabbits, the wild rabbits that would be looked at in this country and post-mortems done probably is very few. So again, the diagnosis, liver histopathology, PCR, and then gene sequence analysis to confirm that it's hemorrhagic disease 2 rather than 1. And they say that it's becoming more virulent, which is unfortunate. Right, so what you might see, again, a lot of this could just be post-mortem artifact. The trachea is dark red and the lungs are dark red, but a lot of these rabbits will have been frozen before they came in here. So once they're thawed, you could get these changes as a sort of artifact. And this is some work done by APHA, as Kate said, I used to work for. And this is 10 years worth of results. And you can see even the large in May, that's only 6 bodies. And it's sort of maybe suggested that hemorrhagic disease 2, you get a peak in late spring here in May, whereas rabbit hemorrhagic disease 1, you got a peak in the autumn, maybe because the young rabbits showed a degree of resistance. Yeah, I just put this in. This is working from home during the lockdown. This is in fact, this is a mountain hare from Derbyshire. I was this chap doing a PhD up there, and I said I'd look at any hares that he had. So nice and hot day in the sun. The thing is, you keep the dachshunds away, and also the flies. It's quite difficult, but it's quite relaxing sitting in the sun doing a post-mortem. I'm just going to briefly go through some parasitic diseases you may see. This one is quite common. This is hepatic coccidiosis. A coccidia is a protozoal single-cell organism, and you may get sort of very little lesions in the liver like this on the left-hand side, just little white tracks, or you could get a really severe affected liver like this. And a few years ago, I had some rabbits brought in from near Hinkley Point, which is the which, as you know, is a nuclear power station in Somerset. and they were worried that these lesions were being caused by radiation sickness. So histopathology confirmed that it wasn't. So these protozoa, if I can get on to the next slide. Oh.
Alex, how many slides have you got left? It's nearly 10
about
to.
2.
Perfect.
About
Thank
two
you.
Or 3. No, yeah, I've just got one more. So this is a section through the liver. Here's a sort of normalish liver. These are in the bile ducts, and here are the little creatures. The arrows pointing to them, and they're in the bile duct, so they can shed out into the bile, which goes through the gallbladder straight into the intestine. Then they can go through the gut out into the pasture, and then they can continue their life cycle. I mean, quickly, this one is another parasitic disease. It's a lot rarer. I've seen it mostly in hares, actually, and this is a nematode, which is a worm. And usually you get nematodes in the gut. So here you got small little lesions like this, which look very similar to the cocci. And here you've got the eggs of this nematode, and in fact they haven't got such a good life cycle because they're not shed directly. It relies on the animal being eaten or dying, and then the liver breaking down and the eggs being distributed on the pasture, either through feces or just due to autolysis. And then other rodents or legomorphs grazing that pasture will become infected. And lastly, there's one called Cysticercus pisciformis, which is a tapeworm, and this is probably quite rare. I don't think I've ever seen any cases of it, and that sort of completes the 3 sort of main parasitic diseases that you might see in rabbits in this country. Oh, I can't get this to work properly. So the conclusions: the good ecosystems engineers, they fill a useful niche there and give you a variety of plant species habitat for different other insects or birds or slugs and snails. Very good prey species is what they need in the Iberian Peninsula. Bad, very large populations are costly to agriculture, and the ugly myxomatosis and rabbit hemorrhagic disease 1 and 2. And then thanks to all these people who've helped and sent information and also pictures, and thanks to everybody else whose material I've used but omitted to mention, but I think I've mentioned everybody. Oh, can't get this right. That's because I'm not doing it on the slideshow because it doesn't work on that. And that is the end. And I'll take any questions.
Alex, that was brilliant. Thank you, folks. I did warn you. We did try to warn you in the title that there was some ugly pictures. I'm really sorry if it put you off your lunch. And I don't know why there's an echo, Bella.
I think someone was unmuted, but I've just muted them now, so it should be okay.
And I did warn you that Alex was quirky. Most people have a picnic in the sun and don't carry out a post-mortem on their blanket. And I've never heard of a cheerful, plump liver cell before. I think it's very exciting. Alex, are you able to take off your talk and pop up your camera just for the last few questions? Is that pushing your Wi-Fi too much? And if you do have a question, it'd be lovely if you pop your camera on and ask it. Marcus, go for it.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the very interesting talk. So I've got 2 questions, if that's okay. For rabbits and hares, which you could sort of say visually they're quite similar, why do you think, or why do we know that their burrowing or living habits are so different? So one lives in a warren underground and the other one sees that a little shallow scoop is more than enough.
I mean, it's just the way they develop. I mean, the fact is that they develop like that. The hare leverets are precocious. So which came first? They were, because I mean, obviously it's quite an effort, and rabbits really need a suitable soil type to be able to burrow into. Whereas hare, if they've got the right vegetation, sorry, can you hear? It keeps going off. Can you hear me at all? Yeah. Because you could say what with any species, it's got a niche, and they're filling it, and presumably the hares can, and they can spread out more. And you think, well, a way of cutting down disease is not to have sort of large populations together. I mean, we talk this with the agriculture. If you've got extensive farming, you're probably less likely to have problems. I mean, I've got a few sheep. I've got 5 sheep on 5 acres, and I never worm them. But if you've got, I don't know, 250 sheep on the same acreage, you're going to have problems with parasites. So you can say that, but I mean, I don't know when the various hare species separated from rabbits, but they're occupying their niche, and also, I say, rabbits need something that they can burrow into.
Yes, that's very good. And just one thing to clarify. So the myxoma viruses, so they weren't created by man, but they were used as a biocontrol after they were found naturally occurring.
Yeah, I'd say that this guy, this lab technician in Uruguay, just realised that, I mean, it's a long time ago, he realised that these 2 different species, and in fact, in some ways, you could say there's so whether the virus co-evolve with that species, because I don't know if you heard of white nose syndrome in bats. So basically, it's wiping out bats in North America, and it's a fungal disease, and the fungal disease is present in Eurasia, and it can cause a limited disease, but it doesn't kill bats. But accidentally, somebody took it to America. The first case was in a show cave, which has about 250,000 people going through, and also it allows cavers, and because we have cavers on Mendip where I live, and cavers never wash. So you can imagine if they're going from here with muddy, contaminated clothing that probably has this fungus to America, and that gets into the cave, and that their bats, the vast numbers have died. It's caused localized extinction, but our bats just co-evolved with the fungus, and so it doesn't really affect them.
Thank you very much, and it just shows the importance of good biosecurity, doesn't it?
Yeah, but also myxoma is a cunning thing, because the myxoma virus in the Iberian Peninsula has grabbed a few bits of gene from other myxoma viruses, and now it's really pathogenic for hares. So that was a worry that we might be getting myxomatosis, a virulent form of myxomatosis in our hares, but again, it would have to be anthropogenic spread from the Iberian Peninsula. But in fact, there's an Importation of Hares Act. You're not allowed to import hares into this country except under license.
Thank you, Alex. Simon Pryor, and then we'll come to Stephen Edwards.
Hi there, thanks so much. Great talk. I hadn't realised how rare they'd become in Spain and Portugal, and I'm just wondering what, in my view, what we're doing wrong here, that populations can peak and crash so quickly for an animal that could have got across the land bridge, I would imagine, and could have been here all the way along. So what is it that's different here that we're doing wrong, not to have a nice stable, food supply, animal predator relationship for rabbits as we have with hares?
Possibly it might be control of predators, because they're trying to encourage predators. And so if you've got a limited population and you've got more predators, then presumably they'll be under more pressure. And I don't know whether also one might expect that the rabbit hemorrhagic viruses might have a slightly different pathogenicity in different countries. I'm not certain that would be true, but you can imagine that they may have a high mortality rate. I mean, certainly, when I've been in the same place for about 35 years, we used to have rabbits in the garden, but we don't get them now. So in some ways, they are under control because of rabbit hemorrhagic disease, but they will increase, given the right conditions. the pub along the way, they've got a few fields next to them, and what's it? 3 or 4 months ago, there were a lot of rabbits, and then they'll gradually disappear. So that I think the rabbit population just goes up and down. That's why I think whenever you're looking at rabbit populations in a local area, you know, 1 week there may be vast numbers, and then a couple of months later there may be you know, very low levels. But yeah, I don't know. But I mean, still in this country there is a lot of predator control.
Yeah, Simon, I think it's myxomatosis as well. We had a large amount of rabbits on our land. The numbers got to ridiculous numbers, and then Mexi hit them, and it has taken them years to come back very, very slowly. Stephen, did you want to read out your question, or shall I read it out?
Can you hear me? Is that working?
Yes, that's great.
Yeah, I suppose I'm at work on a nature reserve, a bit like Innis Las that you mentioned. It's a sand dune nature reserve, and we really value rabbits because they maintain a short turf sward, which we want for various rare plant species. And I didn't know if anyone had any ideas on management, practical management techniques that people have used or we could use that might help give them a bit of a boost, really. I mean, we do see rabbits like everywhere with myxomatosis, and the numbers are going up and down all the time. There's certainly a lot less than they used to be, and we'd like to have more.
Yeah, I mean, well, as I said, I mean, I think if you've got the right population there, they're maintaining sort of interesting and varied habitats. But and maybe we're actually with disease, we're reaching this level that we, you know, I can't remember farmers talking about rabbits causing them any particular problems. Maybe you know, young forestry plantations, if you've got rabbits, I would suggest probably on Mendip deer would be a lot more problem. Oh.
Hey, you're just muted.
Someone was going to do that. Stephen, does that help?
Well, no, I was really just looking for if anyone's done any work on improving situations for rabbits rather than controlling them.
Quite an
well, they are in Spain because they want.
So what are they doing there? Do you think?
I don't know.
Early days,
So
I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a pathologist, so I know they are doing work, and I'm sort of interested in the certainly in the lynx reintroduction that they're doing. But I know that lack of rabbits is being a factor in not providing enough prey species.
So watch out
that
in
might
Spain.
be something we can look at on the internet and see if there's any information about that then. Yeah.
And I think we've got time for one last question from David Bannister, who's waiting patiently.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
In the late 40s and early 50s, rabbit was supposed to be the meat of the future, the thing that chickens seem to have now done. Was Mixie any influence on rabbit not becoming the meat of the future?
Possibly. The thing is, I mean, I remember, I mean, I'm 1953 baby, so I can remember when I was young, people just thought, well, they didn't seem to want to eat rabbit because of myxomatosis, and I think probably far less rabbit is eaten now in the country areas. And I say we import quite a lot from China. And when I've been practicing Cornwall, and there were a number of small farmers that had a rabbit meat production. But it was only on a small scale, and they never really seemed to do very well. And also, you're keeping rabbits in small cages, and it didn't. You know, I think on the sort of animal welfare side, sort of maybe keeping them in warrens would be the way. But yeah, I mean, I think certainly people don't eat rabbit meat like they used to. I mean, I occasionally eat rabbit, but
you know how Babe put people off eating pigs? Do you think we should blame Beatrix Potter for writing King Bunny stories. I don't know. Oh, everyone, I'm conscious of the time. It's 1 minute past 1. Before I say a thank you, please could I implore you to all send records of rabbits to the Devon Biodiversity Record Centre, and the lovely Bella has put up the link there. It's all about logging what's going on, where we see big groups of rabbits not seeing any, or if they've got the disease. So please do that. Bella, thank you so much for your calm IT skills. And Alex, can you pop on your camera just to say hello?
I can't. I mean, I can't. I've been trying. I don't know why.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
It keeps telling me to press Control Shift O, but but the thing is, it nearly stopped me doing it. And I'd say, unfortunately, I couldn't have the screenshot, the proper screenshot, because it seemed to go off at your end. So I only had it on the sort of little tiny ones here. That's why when I tried to change slide, it went through about 3 or 4. IT is, I need somebody to give us or give me some training what to do with it. I don't know why, but yeah,
Alex,
I'm certainly, that's my picture on with the deer. I'm sorry it's not a rabbit.
Okay, it's a brilliant, quirky, very informative talk. And people, can I ask you to put your clapping hands up or put your cameras up and say a big thank you to Alex. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Sorry, if I do another talk, I think in person it's a lot easier. There's less things to go wrong.
Would much rather it was in person, but we will get you in again another time. Bella, anything you'd like to say?
No, that's great. Thank you so much, Kate, and thank you so much, Alex. That was so interesting. And thank you to all our attendees, some really great questions. And do keep an eye out on our website and our social media for more of our webinars. Thanks.
And you'll send a link out to get the recording? Yes.
Yes, yeah, the recording will go up on our website in a week or 2, and I'll send the link to all attendees.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay.
Thanks.
Bye.